Okay, picture this. A baby is born, looks perfectly healthy, but there's a problem, a huge one. They can't eat. And I don't mean they have trouble swallowing, I mean it's physically impossible. Now, this isn't some hypothetical scenario. It's a real birth defect, and for almost 300 years, it was a guaranteed death sentence. So let's dive into the absolutely incredible story of how medicine fought back.
The condition is called esophageal atresia, and here's what that means in simple terms. The esophagus, the food pipe that connects your throat to your stomach, it's not complete. There's a gap. So from the very first moment of life, anything that baby swallows, even its own saliva, has nowhere to go. It just pools and spills over into the lungs. It is a desperate race against time right from the very first breath. And for centuries, that was a race that was always lost. From the first time it was described in the 1600s all the way up to 1939, the survival rate was 0. Not 1%, not a fraction of a percent. 0. Every single baby born with this died. That's the mountain doctors were trying to climb.
But this story, it isn't really about the defect. It's about the people. It's about the generations of surgeons who looked at that 0% survival rate and just said, no, we don't accept that. This is a story about sheer human will, about ingenuity, and about a slow, painful, step-by-step battle against a fatal flaw in our own biology. So let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, to when this problem was first identified as not just some random tragedy, but a specific physical, anatomical problem. The very first time we see this written down is way back in 1670. A man named William Durston noticed a discontinuous esophagus in a conjoined twin he was examining. And for the next 2.5 centuries, that's all it was. A medical curiosity, an observation in a textbook that was, without a single exception, fatal. There was literally no hope. And that discovery kicks off this long, dark period of, despair, really. Doctors knew what was wrong, but they were completely powerless to fix it. The idea of operating deep inside a newborn baby's chest, it was just unthinkable. Now, what I want you to really notice on this slide is that gap. Just look at the timeline. From the first description of the problem in 1670 to the very first attempt to actually fix it in 1913, that's 243 years. Think about that. That's how long this problem was considered completely, totally untouchable. So, in the early 20th century, you have these incredibly brave surgical pioneers, guys like Richter and Lahnemann, who finally said, we have to try. And they had the right idea. Get in there, tie off the connection to the windpipe, and then sew the two ends of the esophagus together. The problem was, the technology just wasn't there. Anesthesia for a tiny baby was a nightmare, and the operation itself was just too much for their little bodies to handle. They were heroic efforts, for sure, but tragically, every single patient died. But then, after centuries of nothing but failure, everything changed. That massive wall of impossibility finally started to crack. This is the moment that survival went from a fantasy to a reality. If you remember one date from this whole story, make it this one, 1939. This is the watershed line. It's the moment the survival rate ticked up from absolute 0 for the very first time. It's the year hope finally arrived. And what's so fascinating is that this hope came from 2 different surgeons with 2 brilliant but totally different game plans. First, in 1939, you have William Ladd. He pulls off the first long-term survival with this really clever multi-stage repair that avoided the big, risky chest operation up front. Then, just 2 years later, Cameron Hite decides to go for it all in one shot, a single, high-risk operation straight into the chest. And incredibly, he succeeded too. And the story of Haite's first success is just wild. First off, the baby was already 8 days old and had to survive a 500-mile trip just to get to the hospital. Then, to even get to the esophagus, Haite's team had to actually remove parts of 4 of the baby's tiny ribs. And get this, even after they did the repair, it leaked. By all rights, it should have failed, but somehow, against all odds, the leak healed itself and the baby survived. The barrier was officially broken. So once the impossible was proven possible, the whole game changed. The race was now on to make this miracle safer, more reliable. This was the next phase, turning the possible into the routine. And the progress was just stunningly fast. Remember William Ladd, the first surgeon to have a survivor? Well, by 1944, that's just 5 years after that very first success, he published his results on a whole series of patients, and his survival rate, 60%. Let that sink in. from 0 to 60% in 5 years. It's absolutely staggering.
And from there, the improvements just kept coming, decade after decade. Better anesthesia, much better intensive care for the babies after surgery, little refinements to the technique, it all added up. By 1986, surgeons were reporting an incredible 83% survival rate.
And by the 1990s, they had done it. The war was essentially won. Survival rates climbed over 90%. What was once an absolute, unavoidable death sentence had become a treatable and, for the most part, survivable condition.
But surgeons are never satisfied, are they? The innovation didn't stop. The next revolution wasn't just about saving the baby's life. It was about making the surgery itself gentler, less invasive, and less traumatic for these tiny little patients. And this right here shows you the night and day difference. The old way, the open thoracotomy, meant a big incision, spreading the ribs, sometimes even removing them. The modern way, thoracoscopy, is it's like building a ship in a bottle. Surgeons use 3 tiny little holes and miniature instruments to do the entire complex repair without ever really opening up the chest. It's just incredible. And this whole new era began in 1999. That's when the very first successful thoracoscopic repair was done. It was a massive technical challenge, but it marked the beginning of the super sophisticated, minimally invasive surgery that's used today. And you can just feel the cautious excitement in this quote from one of the pioneers, Dr. Stephen Rothenberg, just a year after that first surgery. He's saying, look, this is really, really hard to do. He called it a formidable technical challenge, but he also knew it was the future. It just perfectly captures that spirit of always pushing forward that defines this entire story. So let's just recap this incredible arc. You start in 1670 with a problem that is 100% fatal. Then, in 1939, you get the first breakthrough, the first survivors. By the 1990s, it's become a standard operation with over 90% survival. And then, in 1999, the whole thing is revolutionized again with minimally invasive surgery. What a journey. And the end result of all of this, of all these centuries of effort, is that today, children born with esophageal atresia can expect to live long, healthy, near normal lives. What was once an absolute tragedy has been transformed piece by piece into a modern medical triumph, giving thousands upon thousands of kids the simple, vital ability to take their first bite of food. You know, it took 300 years to turn a condition that was 100% fatal into what is now, for the most part, a routine repair. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the seemingly impossible medical challenges of today that will be considered the routine fixes of tomorrow?